Welcome, friends. Today's single quote's a story is going to touch your soul, a story of pain, kindness, and the miracle that follows. It was a lonely winter night. A struggling single dad named Daniel drove his rusty old pickup through the freezing countryside. His hands were rough from endless work, his clothes stained with grease, but his heart pure and kind. Beside him sat his little daughter Lily, holding a worn-out teddy bear. They were on their way home after another long day at the garage. Suddenly, Daniel saw something up ahead. A luxury car stopped on the roadside, smoke rising from the engine. He slowed down. A woman in an elegant red coat stood helplessly beside it, waving for help. Despite being tired, Daniel stopped immediately. Even angels stop for those in need, he whispered to Lily and stepped out. The cold wind hit his face as he walked toward the woman. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked softly. "I think my car broke down. ... My phone's dead," she replied, her voice trembling with worry. Daniel smiled kindly. "Don't worry, I've got you covered." He lifted the hood, his hands moving with experience. Even though his fingers were numb from the cold, oil smudged his face, but he didn't care. Lily watched proudly from the truck, whispering, "That's my dad, my hero." After several minutes, the car engine finally came to life. The woman's eyes filled with relief. "You fixed it. You really did," she said, almost crying. Daniel simply wiped his hands and said, "No need to thank me, ma'am. Just drive safe." He refused her money and walked back to his truck, unaware that his simple act of kindness had already changed his destiny. The next morning, Daniel was back at his small, broken-down garage trying to fix an old tire. His hands ached, his rent was due, and his tools were few. Suddenly, a loud whooshing sound filled the sky. Dust swirled everywhere. He looked up. A helicopter was landing right in front of him. Lily ran out shouting, "Daddy, look!" The same woman stepped out of the helicopter, dressed in a graceful white dress, her eyes shining with gratitude. Daniel stood frozen, unable to understand. She walked toward him and said, her voice trembling with emotion, "Daniel, you didn't just fix my car. You reminded me that kindness still exists. I found out about your life, your struggles, your little girl, and I want to help." She handed him an envelope. Inside were papers, the ownership documents of a brand new auto workshop, fully equipped and paid for. Danielson's hands shook. This can't be real," he whispered. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "It's real, Daniel. Because you deserve it. You helped me when I was stranded. Now let me help you build the future you deserve." Friends, never stop believing in kindness. It may return when you least expect it, and it may bring your destiny along with it. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, where every story proves that good hearts still win. The morning sun rose over the small town, painting everything in shades of gold. Daniel stood quietly outside his new auto workshop, a beautiful building with shining glass windows, brand new tools, and a big sign that read, "Lily's Garage, where kindness lives." His daughter Lily ran around happily, her laughter echoing like music. For the first time in years, Daniel's heart felt light. No debts, no fear, no hunger, just peace and hope. He still couldn't believe that the woman he helped on that lonely road had changed everything. She wasn't just rich, she was kind. She didn't just give him money, she gave him dignity. Every screw, every wall, every tool in that garage was a symbol of a miracle born from compassion. As Daniel tightened the last bolt on a customer's car, a familiar sound filled the air, the whirring blades of a helicopter. He looked up with a soft smile, knowing exactly who it was. The helicopter landed gracefully beside the workshop. Dust swirled through the sunlight, and there she was, the same woman, now in a flowing red dress, walking toward him with a gentle smile. Daniel removed his gloves, his heart racing. "You came back," he said, his voice full of emotion. She nodded. "How could I not? You reminded me that even in a broken world there are still good men. And today I wanted to see what your kindness created." She looked around the workshop, her eyes glistening with pride. "You did all this, Daniel. You turned a single act of goodness into something that will help hundreds." Daniel's eyes welled up. "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled softly. "No, Daniel. You could because your heart was already rich long before your pockets were." Lily ran to her and hugged her legs, whispering, "Thank you for making my daddy smile again." The woman knelt, hugged her back tightly, and whispered, "You both reminded me what family feels like." The wind blew gently as the helicopter blades began to spin again. Daniel stood still, watching as she waved goodbye, her eyes filled with unspoken emotion. "Goodbye, Daniel," she said softly. "Keep spreading kindness. The world needs more hearts like yours." As the helicopter lifted into the golden sky, Daniel whispered, "I will. I promise." Lily took his hand. "Daddy, are we happy now?" Daniel knelt down, hugged her close, and said through tears, "Yes, sweetheart. We're more than happy. We're blessed." The camera slowly zooms out, the golden sunlight shining over Lily's garage, the flag waving gently, and a father and daughter standing together, symbols of hope, love, and the power of one good heart. Friends, remember this forever. One act of kindness can rewrite your entire destiny. That night, after helping the stranded woman, Daniel returned home with his little daughter Lily. Their small, old house was quiet, only the ticking clock and the sound of the cold wind outside. The roof leaked, the heater barely worked, and dinner was nothing more than a bowl of soup. But Daniel still smiled. He tucked Lily into bed and kissed her forehead. "One day, sweetheart," he whispered, "things will get better. I don't know how, but they will." Lily, half asleep, smiled softly and said, "Daddy, I know God is watching us." Those words pierced his heart. After she slept, Daniel sat alone by the window, staring at the moon. His hands trembled from exhaustion. Bills were piled on the table, rent was due, and the landlord had already warned him. But he couldn't stop thinking about the woman he had helped. There's something about her eyes, sadness, gratitude, and a strange sense of connection. The next morning, Daniel went to his tiny garage, a broken place with cracked walls, a half-dead signboard, and tools older than him. He worked for hours fixing old cars, earning barely enough to buy food, yet he never complained. While he worked, his friend Mark stopped by. "Daniel, you're wasting your kindness," Mark said bitterly. "People take advantage of you." "That woman you helped last night won't even remember your name." Daniel smiled faintly, wiping the grease from his hands. "Maybe she won't," he said, "but that's not why I helped her. Kindness isn't business, Mark, it's who I am." Mark shook his head and walked away. Daniel looked up at the sky, dark clouds gathering again. The world seemed heavy, but he refused to give up. Hours later, Lily arrived at the garage with a small lunchbox. "Daddy, I made this with Miss Clara from next door," she said proudly. Inside was a tiny sandwich and a hand-drawn picture. Daniel fixing a car with a big smile. Under it, Lily had written in shaky letters, "My dad is the hero who helps people." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. He hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're my reason. Lily, you're my miracle." As the day ended, Daniel sat outside the garage looking at the sunset. He was tired, broken, and unsure of tomorrow. But deep inside, he felt something different, a strange peace, as if life was preparing to reward him for every silent sacrifice he had ever made. He didn't know that the woman he helped last night was not just anyone. She was someone powerful, someone who had the ability to change his destiny. And as the last rays of sunlight touched his face, far away, in a tall city building, that same woman stood by her window, holding her heart and whispering, "That man, he helped me without asking for anything. I have to find him." The winds were changing. The storm that once broke Daniel's spirit was now carrying a miracle toward him. Friends, life tests the kindest souls the hardest. But remember, every tear you shed, every struggle you face, becomes the reason behind a miracle you never saw coming. It was early morning. The sky was still gray, and Daniel was already at his small garage working silently. His hands were rough, his clothes covered in oil, but his heart as pure as ever. Little Lily sat nearby, drawing hearts on a dusty piece of cardboard, humming softly. Then suddenly the ground began to tremble. A deep whooshing sound echoed from above. Tools rattled on the table. Daniel looked up in confusion and then froze. A helicopter was descending right in front of his garage. The wind from the blades blew dust everywhere. Neighbors came out, covering their faces, whispering in shock. Lily ran to her father and held his leg tightly. "Daddy, what's happening?" Daniel's eyes widened as the helicopter door opened slowly, and stepping out was the same woman he had helped on that lonely road. But this time she looked different, powerful, elegant and graceful, like someone who carried both strength and gratitude in her heart. She walked toward Daniel with tears glimmering in her eyes. Daniel took a step back, stunned. "You?" he whispered. She smiled softly. "Yes, Daniel, I told you I'd never forget your kindness. I searched for you." He stammered, "You didn't have to. I was just helping someone who needed it." The woman shook her head. "No, Daniel, you helped me when no one else would. That night, you didn't just fix my car. You fixed something broken inside me. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world." Lily peeked out from behind her father. The woman knelt down and smiled warmly at her. "And you must be Lily," she said softly. "Your father's a hero." Lily's eyes sparkled. "I know," she whispered proudly. The woman stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "Daniel, I learned about your life, your struggles, your late wife, your debts, the garage you've been trying to save. You've carried pain with grace and still kept helping others. That's rare. And it deserves something extraordinary." From behind her, two men stepped forward carrying a large folder and a small box. She opened the folder and handed it to Daniel. He unfolded the papers slowly, his hands shaking. It was a contract, legal documents, transferring ownership of a brand new auto center, fully funded and built under his name, Lily's Garage, a place of kindness. Daniel's knees weakened. His voice cracked. I don't understand. Why me?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Because the world needs people like you to rise. You gave without asking, and now it's your turn to receive." This isn't charity, Daniel. It's a thank you from destiny. Friends, remember, life might take everything from you, but it always returns what you give, multiplied by love. Never stop being kind, because your kindness today could be your miracle tomorrow. Welcome, friends. This is the final and most emotional chapter of Daniel's story, the moment when tears, prayers, and kindness come together to create a miracle no one ever imagined. The golden morning light spilled across the brand new building that now stood proudly at the edge of town. Lily's garage, where kindness lives, fresh paint gleamed in the sunlight, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of hope and new beginnings. Daniel stood outside the garage in a clean blue uniform, his name embroidered neatly on the chest. His eyes were moist as he looked up at the big signboard. It was more than just a name, it was a promise, a symbol of everything he had fought for. Lily came running, wearing a tiny mechanic's outfit, giggling as she carried a small wrench. "Daddy, look, I'm helping," she said proudly. Daniel bent down, hugged her close, and whispered, "You already did, sweetheart. You were the reason I never gave up." Inside the garage, everything was new, shiny tools, bright lights, and walls filled with photos of people Daniel had helped over the years. Every face told a story of kindness returned. The same woman he helped, Amelia, as he now knew her, had made sure this place would become a home not just for him, but for every struggling soul who needed a chance. Just then, the familiar whirring sound of blades filled the sky again. Daniel stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the sun. A helicopter descended slowly, dust rising around him. It was her, Amelia. As she stepped out, her long red dress flowed in the wind, her eyes shining with emotion. Daniel smiled as Lily ran toward her, shouting, "Miss Amelia!" She caught Lily in her arms, laughing through her tears. "Look at you, little one. You've grown into sunshine." Daniel walked closer, his heart full. "I don't even know how to thank you," he said softly. Amelia looked at him, her voice trembling. "You already did, Daniel. You thanked me the night you stopped to help me when no one else did. That moment changed both our lives. I was lost, and your kindness reminded me what really matters." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. "You gave me more than I could ever repay." She smiled warmly. "Then repay me by doing for others what you did for me." Daniel looked around. People were gathering, clapping, watching as the two stood together. He turned toward the crowd, his voice strong but emotional. "Friends, I was just a mechanic trying to survive. I lost my wife, my job, my hope. But one act of kindness, one simple act, brought all this back to me. It taught me that the world may forget what you say, but it will never forget what you do from the heart." Friends, remember, kindness costs nothing, but it can build everything. One good heart can change 1,000 lives, including your own. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, where every story reminds us that miracles don't happen by luck. They happen by love.